It's 2:38 a.m. in Kyiv. The air raid sirens just went silent. Then radar operators see it, 43 incoming contacts. Missiles and drones, all locked on Ukrainian cities. But this isn't just another strike. This one's different. Russia had been planning this for weeks, stockpiling missiles, moving launchers into position under the cover of darkness. Their target wasn't just one city, it was 7. Kyiv, Dnipro, Kharkiv, Sumy, Zaporizhzhia, Poltava, and Cherkasy. The goal was simple: overwhelm Ukraine's air defenses. Hit everything at once: energy infrastructure, railways, communication hubs, and force Ukraine into the dark. Ukrainian intelligence had picked up unusual movements near the Russian border 3 days earlier: launcher convoys, increased radio chatter, but they couldn't predict the exact timing. All they knew was that something big was coming. And when the sirens started wailing across multiple regions simultaneously, they realized this wasn't a probe. This was a calculated, coordinated assault designed to break morale and cripple infrastructure in a single night. The stakes were enormous. Ukraine's power grid had already been hammered by previous strikes. Another major hit could plunge millions into freezing darkness. The railway network was vital for moving troops, equipment, and humanitarian aid. And residential areas, those were the soft targets that would generate fear and chaos. At 2:40 a.m., Ukrainian air defense commanders received the alert. Multiple launch detections from Russian territory. The first wave consisted of Shahed drones, the Iranian-designed loitering munitions that Russia had been using for months. Slow, loud, but deadly if they reached their targets. Behind them, faster contacts appeared. Cruise missiles, possibly Kalibr or Kh-101 variants. Flight time to Kyiv, less than 12 minutes. Defense batteries across the country went live. S-300 systems, Iris-T launchers, Gepard anti-aircraft guns, NATO-supplied Patriots. Every available interceptor was spun up because there weren't enough systems to cover every city at once. Commanders had to make impossible choices: protect the capital, or spread coverage thin and risk losing everything. In Kyiv, mobile air defense units raced through empty streets, setting up firing positions on rooftops and in parks. Operators scanned their radar screens, watching the incoming wave split into multiple groups. Some drones veered toward Dnipro, others angled northwest toward Sumy. The missiles stayed locked on Kyiv and Kharkiv. It was a multi-axis attack designed to fracture Ukraine's response. At 2:47 a.m., the first interceptions began. Tracer fire lit up the night sky over Kyiv as Gepard guns engaged the lead Shahed drones. Explosions bloomed in the darkness, orange fireballs that briefly turned night into day. But for every drone shot down, another slipped through the gaps. At 2:51 a.m., the first missile hit Kyiv. It slammed into an energy substation in the northern district, detonating with enough force to shatter windows 3 blocks away. The transformer exploded in a cascade of sparks and flame, plunging an entire neighborhood into blackness. Seconds later, another missile struck a railway depot near the city center. Steel rails twisted like ribbons. Freight cars were thrown off their tracks. Fire spread rapidly through the maintenance buildings. In Dnipro, a Shahed drone evaded interception and crashed into a residential building. The explosion tore through 5 floors, collapsing balconies and sending debris raining onto the street below. Residents stumbled out into the cold, some still in pajamas, clutching children and pets. Flames poured from the gaping wound in the building's side, and emergency crews hadn't even arrived yet. Kharkiv took the worst of it. 3 cruise missiles hit within 90 seconds of each other. One struck an industrial complex on the city's eastern edge, triggering secondary explosions that echoed for miles. Another hit a power distribution hub, cutting electricity to half the city. The third missile, the most devastating, struck near a residential neighborhood. The blast wave shattered homes, peeled roofs off buildings, and left a smoking crater in what used to be a quiet street. The night sky over multiple Ukrainian cities glowed orange. Smoke columns rose hundreds of meters into the air. And the attack wasn't over. More contacts were still inbound. At 3:02 a.m., a second wave appeared on radar. This time, the drones came from a different direction, approaching from the southeast, targeting Zaporizhzhia and Poltava. Ukrainian commanders realized they were facing a coordinated, multi-phase assault. The first wave was meant to draw out air defenses and deplete interceptor stocks. The second wave was designed to exploit the gaps. In Sumy, air raid sirens wailed as residents scrambled into basements and subway stations. A Shahed drone broke through the defensive perimeter and struck a railway bridge on the outskirts of the city. The structure collapsed into the river below, severing a critical supply line. Another drone targeted a fuel depot, but Ukrainian forces managed to intercept it just 300 meters from impact. The explosion in midair rained burning debris across an empty field. Zaporizhia's defenses engaged multiple drones simultaneously. Iris-T systems locked and fired, streaking white contrails across the pre-dawn sky. 2 drones were destroyed. A third was damaged but continued on a degraded flight path, crashing into an industrial zone and igniting a warehouse filled with automotive parts. The fire spread rapidly, and firefighters struggled to contain the blaze amid ongoing air raid alerts. In Cherkasy, a city rarely targeted, residents were caught off guard when a missile struck an electrical substation. The blast knocked out power to the entire region and damaged critical switching equipment. Engineers estimated repairs would take days, possibly weeks. Without power, water pumping stations couldn't function. Hospitals switched to backup generators. Families huddled in the cold, wondering if the attacks would continue into the morning. Back in Kyiv, emergency crews worked frantically to extinguish fires and pull survivors from collapsed structures. Ambulances raced through darkened streets, their sirens cutting through the eerie quiet between explosions. In the northern district, rescue workers dug through rubble, searching for anyone trapped beneath the wreckage of the railway depot. Every few minutes, distant booms echoed as air defenses engaged more incoming drones. The chaos was spreading. What started as a focused assault on Kyiv had metastasized into a nationwide nightmare. But here's what Russian planners didn't anticipate. Ukraine had learned from previous strikes. Over the past year, Ukrainian forces had quietly decentralized their air defense networks. Instead of relying on large centralized command posts that could be targeted, they created smaller, mobile teams that operated independently. These teams could relocate quickly, making them nearly impossible to track. Additionally, Ukraine had been integrating Western-supplied systems with Soviet-era platforms in unconventional ways. Iris-T launchers were paired with old radar systems that Russian intelligence had written off as obsolete. Gepard guns were positioned not just in cities, but along rural corridors where drones often flew low to avoid detection. And Ukraine had developed homemade electronic warfare tools, crude but effective jammers that could disrupt the GPS guidance systems on Shahed drones. At 3:14 a.m., Ukrainian forces deployed one of these jammers near Poltava. 3 Shahed drones that had been vectoring toward the city suddenly veered off course. Their navigation systems scrambled. One crashed into an empty field. Another circled aimlessly before running out of fuel and plummeting into a forest. The third turned back toward the Russian border, where it was likely shot down by confused Russian air defenses. This wasn't luck. It was adaptation. Ukraine had turned every strike into a learning opportunity, refining tactics and exploiting weaknesses in Russian attack patterns. They couldn't stop every missile or drone, but they could make the cost of each strike higher than Russia anticipated. Russia tried to adjust. At 3:22 a.m., a third wave launched. This time, the missiles came in at staggered intervals, designed to confuse tracking systems and prevent simultaneous interceptions. Some flew high beyond the reach of shorter-range systems. Others skimmed low, hugging terrain to avoid radar, but the staggered approach created its own problems. Ukrainian air defense operators had more time to react. They prioritized targets based on trajectory, focusing first on missiles headed for population centers. A Patriot battery near Kyiv locked onto an incoming Kh-101 cruise missile and fired. The interceptor streaked upward, leaving a brilliant white trail. Impact came at an altitude of 4,000 meters, a direct hit that vaporized the missile before it could reach its target. In Kharkiv, a mobile S-300 unit repositioned after the earlier strikes and engaged 2 more missiles. One was destroyed. The other evaded and continued its approach, but the delay gave evacuation teams precious extra minutes to clear nearby buildings. When the missile finally struck, it hit an already damaged industrial site instead of a residential area. Russian forces then attempted to use decoy drones, cheap, expendable units designed to mimic the radar signature of actual threats. The idea was to force Ukraine to waste interceptors on fake targets. But Ukrainian operators had seen this tactic before. They held fire on suspicious contacts, waiting to confirm legitimate threats. When the decoys became obvious, they were ignored. Ukraine's limited interceptor stocks were preserved for real dangers. At 3:35 a.m., the attack tempo began to slow. Russia had launched everything in their immediate arsenal. Now they were waiting to assess damage and plan follow-up strikes. But Ukraine wasn't waiting. At 3:41 a.m., as Russian commanders reviewed strike reports, something unexpected happened. Ukrainian forces launched their own counterattack. Long-range drones, modified. Extended-range platforms that Ukraine had been quietly building and stockpiling lifted off from concealed launch sites deep inside Ukrainian territory. These weren't the small, improvised drones that had struck Russian border regions in previous months. These were purpose-built strike platforms carrying heavier payloads and equipped with enhanced navigation systems. Their targets weren't random. Ukrainian intelligence had identified the launch sites used in tonight's assault. Ammunition depots, command posts, radar installations. At 4:03 a.m., the first Ukrainian drone crossed into Russian territory. It flew low using valleys and forests to mask its approach. Russian air defenses focused on protecting forward positions didn't detect it until it was too late. The drone struck a fuel depot near Belgorod, triggering a massive explosion that sent flames hundreds of meters into the sky. Secondary blasts followed as stored ammunition cooked off, creating a fireworks display visible for kilometers. 20 minutes later, another Ukrainian drone hit a Russian radar station near Kursk. The strike didn't just destroy equipment, it temporarily blinded Russian air defenses in that sector, creating a gap that Ukraine could potentially exploit in future operations. This wasn't about matching Russia missile for missile. Ukraine didn't have the resources for that. But they could make Russia pay a price. They could demonstrate that attacks wouldn't go unanswered. And they could force Russia to divert resources to defend its own territory instead of focusing entirely on offense. By 4:30 a.m., the skies over Ukraine finally began to quiet. The last of the Russian drones had been intercepted or had crashed. Fires still burned in multiple cities, but the immediate threat had passed. When dawn broke over Ukraine, the damage was staggering. 3 civilians were confirmed dead, including a child killed in the Dnipro strike. Dozens more were injured, many critically. Entire neighborhoods sat without power. Railway lines were severed. Energy infrastructure lay in ruins. But Ukraine's response had been swift and effective. Out of 43 incoming threats, Ukrainian air defenses intercepted over 30. A success rate that would have been impossible a year earlier. Russia had launched a massive assault designed to overwhelm and demoralize it. They wanted to prove that Ukraine's defenses were fragile, that Western support wasn't enough, that resistance was futile. Instead, they got a lesson in resilience. Ukraine absorbed the strike, adapted in real time, and hit back. The cost was high, but Ukraine remained unbroken. The real victory wasn't in the numbers. It was in the message. Every intercepted missile, every evacuated building, every retaliatory strike, they all said the same thing. Ukraine would not yield. Not tonight. Not ever. Subscribe to see how this war continues to evolve.